Canada, a wrestling hotbed. Home to countless legends, wrestling families, and some of the most iconic territories of the era, including one that is incredibly overlooked. Founded by a wrestler, this promotion had a pretty interesting schedule, roster, and history overall. So let's take a trip up north to our first Canadian DCW. This is Defunct Championship Wrestling, Episode 19, the story of Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. When most people think about Canadian wrestling promotions, they may think of Maple Leaf Wrestling in Toronto, International Wrestling in Montreal, and of course, Stampede Wrestling in Calgary. However, they weren't the only promotions. Obviously, we'll get to those three and others in the Great White North eventually, but today we're going to discuss one that operated along Canada's eastern seaboard, and that isn't widely remembered as fondly: Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling, and its founder, Emil Dupri. A New Brunswick native, Dupri was a mainstay in territories throughout Canada in the 1960s, and down in the US, working places like Detroit, St. Louis, the Carolinas, AWA, and even Vince McMahon Sr.'s Capital Wrestling. Although he was never the centerpiece for these promotions, he was an in-demand talent that found a consistent spot on the card. Later in life, he seemed happy to have been where he was in the business. In a 2006 interview, he reflected on his career, stating, "I knew you can't be Gorgeous George, you can't be Buddy Rogers, you can't be Pat O'Connor. You've got to be who you are and do whatever it is they ask you to do. That was my career and everything went well." But Dupri always found himself leaving these territories in favor of coming back home. No matter how successful his runs elsewhere were going, he always returned to New Brunswick. By the mid-1960s, the promotion that had been operating in Dupri's home area, known as the Maritimes, and other times as International Wrestling, started to go downhill. In 1964, Dupri purchased a stake in the company, becoming partners with promoter Len Hughes. Shortly after Dupri became a partner, the promotion brought in stars like Gene Kiniski and started to see business improve. Then Dupri went completely outside the box and promoted something that the company hadn't presented before: women's matches. And not just women's matches, but dwarf women's matches. The move was a point of contention between the partners. Hughes didn't understand why Dupri would book such a spectacle. But that was exactly why. Dupri argued that it was an attraction, something people hadn't seen before. Give the audience something other than the same old same old. There may have been a bit of jealousy influencing Hughes' reaction to Dupri's promotional style. See, prior to Emil coming in and nudging the promotion in a new direction, ticket sales were only about $1,000, like $1,000. But once Dupri got involved and did all the things he was doing, tickets skyrocketed to $7,000. Doesn't seem like a lot today, but back then, with things being as cheap as they were, that was a massive improvement. This disagreement and a dispute over money eventually led to the pair splitting when Dupri decided to start promoting on his own. They'd run separate shows until Hughes went out of business, and Emil took over his towns, rebranding as Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. Although the promotion had its roots in the 1960s, it was the 1970s when Dupri's vision would bring Atlantic Grand Prix to a new level. Shows with stars like Sweet Daddy Siki, Don Leo Jonathan, Dino Bravo, and Andre the Giant. In fact, when Andre would come up to the area, he brought in the largest houses, unsurprisingly. Estimates range from $40,000 to $100,000 gates for Andre's tours. One of the main draws for stars to come to Atlantic Grand Prix was decent paydays, but mostly it was the schedule. Unlike other territories at the time, APG didn't run all year round. They only ran the summer months, May through September, in places like New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Beautiful provinces to be in during that time of year. The toughest man to ever live, Harley Race, once commented on working the Maritimes, stating, "Truthfully, the week I enjoyed up there was very enjoyable. I met a lot of great people and ate a lot of lobster. If I had the opportunity to go back, I'd go back." Sure, this was towards the end of Harley's in-ring career, But I'm sure this experience was pretty similar for the boys back in the 1970s too. Another perk was that the drives from town to town were short. Other territories you may have to drive seemingly endless hours to get to the next town. Grand Prix was able to abbreviate the travel based on the geographic area, but also by setting up shows almost anywhere. From big arenas like the Halifax Forum every Thursday, to out in a field at a potato festival. If there was a town that needed entertainment, Atlantic Grand Prix was there. Dupri was also well liked and respected by the boys. Ron Hutchinson, who worked for Atlantic Grand Prix as the Masked Thunderbolt, remembered Emil as a wrestler's promoter, never forgetting his roots, telling the CBC in 2023, "There's a difference between a boss that has never done what you're doing, but expects you to do things knowing full well it may not be possible to do. But he knew what could be done. You couldn't ask for a better boss, really." And Dupri wasn't just a respected promoter. He was also a respected trainer. He supposedly never took money from his students when they took bookings outside of Atlantic Grand Prix. It was common for promoters to take a booking fee if they got a student work elsewhere. That wasn't Dupri's goal with training. One student, Eric Dissett, once commented, "He didn't train for money. He did it because he wanted to pass on the knowledge of what he learned over the decades of working with the best talent in the world." This respect in the business would earn Dupri a very interesting offer with a promotion in the US. In 1978, Dupri agreed to a partnership with Angelo Paffo's ICW out of Kentucky. The partnership would see Angelo's sons, Lonnie Paffo and Macho Man Randy Savage, come up to the Maritimes for the summer. They mostly wrestled each other over the Atlantic Grand Prix International Championship, but did have some matches against Grand Prix regulars. Bringing in outside talent like this was a pretty big attraction for Atlantic Grand Prix. Dupri combined great US territory stars like Andre, Terry Funk, and Ric Flair, with local stars like Killer Carl Kropp, the Cuban Assassin, and Leo Burke throughout the 1970s and 80s. He wasn't perfect, however. He was criticized for changing names of his talent to sound similar to established stars, that he buried local talent in favor of big names, and for disregarding copyright. But compared to what other promoters have done, these are fairly tame accusations. At some point in the late 70s, early 80s, Atlantic Grand Prix landed a syndicated TV deal with networks ATV and ASN. The show was your standard studio wrestling format with squash matches, over-the-top characters, and a small audience that could get really hot when you wanted them to. Of course, there's some shouty territory promos.
"You should have seen what we did to Archie Goldie and Stephen Pettipaw last week. After we beat them up so bad, the Cuban and I, they have the nerve to want to have a street fight." Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. Archie Goldie. The Cuban and I, we grew up on street fights. We know everything to be known about street fights. Don't you ever tell anybody that you're the stomper, because we stomped you last week more than anybody ever stomped anybody. And what are we going to do to them, Cuban?
And even some wrestlers sitting in on commentary.
He is ready because he has the superior entrance into a superior group of people, namely Mr. Hunt Herman and myself, Silicon, group the European champions. And look at the man.
Most episodes are missing, but there are some available on YouTube. So if you remember the show, you'll be able to take a walk down memory lane and hear that iconic theme once again. The show ran for a few years and brought new stars to the area like Ron Hutchinson, Hercules Ayala, Man Mountain Mike, and Stephen Pettipaw right into the living rooms of wrestling fans across Canada. By this point, Atlantic Grand Prix was really rockin'. They were running 14 shows a week with 2 rosters all season every year. Their stars were so popular that Dupri even claims that selling 8x10s of the babyfaces alone would cover the building and travel costs. It was just prints, and the government doesn't know how much you sold. In 1988, as Dupri was getting older and looking to get out of the business, he sold Grand Prix to Stephen Pettipa. Pettipa ran the promotion until 1990. During Pettipa's time running Atlantic Grand Prix, the TV show would change its name to World Grand Prix Wrestling. Pettipa's version of Grand Prix saw an influx of new talent, like Mike Lazansky, pushing guys who'd been with Grand Prix already, like popular Buddy Lane, and the import of international talent like Tokyo Chono, who is, yes, Masahiro Chono, the New Japan legend. I was absolutely floored when I discovered that it was that Chono. Honestly, this run of TV was much more up my alley. I preferred the in-ring action even if the characters didn't stand out like before. And thankfully there's a lot more footage of this TV run floating around online. Pettipa would also continue to run the school, training wrestlers like Robert Millet, who we would know as Kurgan.
Bob Brown, your interfering in matches is over, buddy. Because I got my partner right here, and he'll back us up. It doesn't matter if it's me or Leo Burke or the Beast or whoever it is. If you want to stick your nose in business, I got a partner here that's going to back us up. So you come on in anytime you want to.
The Maritime Giant certainly making his impressions felt here.
Throughout the 1990s, several promoters tried to recreate Dupri's success with their own versions of Grand Prix. Although they featured names like Rip Rogers and Rick Martel, along with future stars like Sexton Hardcastle and Christian Cage, none really captured the audience of the original. Everyone I've come across who's written about Atlantic Grand Prix seems to all agree that these promotions weren't in the same lineage of Dupri's promotion, even if they used the Grand Prix name or something similar. But that would change in 1999, when Emil Dupri revived the real Grand Prix. Hey, Editor Scott here, just breaking in to clarify that Rene Dupri has suggested that his dad was still running shows in the mid-90s with the likes of the guys mentioned previously on the cards. But most of what I've read and footage I've come across tell a different story. So, as usual, the truth might be somewhere in the middle. Alright, back to the episode. His son Rene Dupri had started wrestling a year or two earlier. So Emil came out of retirement to run Grand Prix and help guide his career a bit. Also, it should be noted that Rene at the time was working as Rene Rougeau.
Looks like Rougeau has been into the weights a little bit.
This revival roster included the additions of Chi-Chi Cruz, Joe E. Legend, and Bobby Roode. Around 2001, Atlantic Grand Prix started to hold less events but still ran every year, again touring May through September until finally ceasing operations in 2017. Although Emil never finished high school, he absorbed information like a sponge. He was always listening and learning. Thanks in part to this curiosity, Dupri actually ended up in a better financial situation than most of his peers. On advice from a friend, Emil invested in some real estate properties. It was a great decision for his future. As he got older, he was able to have some non-wrestling income. In 2023, Emil Dupri passed away at the age of 86, leaving a legacy that still lives in the hearts and memories of fans to this very day. I think one of the things I love most about Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling is its purity. And by that, I mean there's no investors funneling a bunch of money into the promotion to get rich quick, only to drop out at the first sign of trouble. Money wasn't what drove Emil Dupri. Atlantic Grand Prix is the story of a wrestler who loved the business, wanted to see it grow and entertain fans. That was his passion. We haven't discussed many territories in this series, so this type of story isn't a scenario I've gotten to talk about often. A wrestler running a promotion for the love of the game and a little bit of money? What a concept. And that's the story of Atlantic Grand Prix Wrestling. To really sum up my thoughts on the company in a much more articulate way, I'll again steal a quote from Ron Hutchinson, who once said, "Emil Dupri was an often overlooked Canadian pro wrestling icon. He gave work and opportunities to so many with his Grand Prix Wrestling territory. A grand territory that just might have been the best kept secret in pro wrestling." If you'd like to check out any Atlantic Grand Prix action, I've left a couple of playlists in the description, so check those out. I know there's so many great talents from Grand Prix's history that I didn't mention, so take me to task in the comments. Who's your favorite wrestler from Atlantic Grand Prix? Also be sure to leave other promotions to cover in the future. Speaking of which, the next episode will be the Season 2 finale. So here's a little hint.
Hey! We ordered the damn shit! Because we're hungry, not because we wanted to fuck around, so don't cuss me!
I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Watch wrestling, love wrestling. Thanks for watching.